All right, kids. Well, what do you want to talk about, everybody? I'm Ned the Dead. This is Doc, and this is Kenobi Wan. I will just tell you guys briefly what, if you don't know what the deal is. We are responsible for the horrible Ned the Dead show / Chiller Theater that has aired in the Green Bay television market since 1983. The show started in 83, went to 89. I split to Milwaukee for a while, where I was from, and then came back to Green Bay, and we picked it back up from 95 until 2010. It's probably my child calling. I think I'll turn my phone off now. That's not very cool, and it was, in fact. So basically, you know, we have one of the differences between us and other incarnations of horror-type shows is that we have aired on mainstream television virtually our entire lives. So unlike things that are just online or just on YouTube, we began on network television and we lived on network television until we met our unseemly demise in 2010. So, you know, basically, if you guys have questions about anything relating to these kind of shows, television in general, and the way that things have changed, or in ways that you can utilize social media and all that kind of stuff, feel free, you know. I mean,
how did you pick your movies?
Well, movies, the question is, how did we pick our movies? And so basically, back when it started, television stations would buy movie packages. So they would buy, let's say 100 movies, and they would be called the A package or whatever. They'd pay a substantial amount. So they would get their True Grit John Waynes and their junk like that, which they considered at the time to be hot titles. And then in addition, they would get a horrifying collection of funk-ridden other movies that they then had to deal with, right? So they would be, and generally horror movies fell in that genre. There was lots of horror movies. You know, back in the day, there was substantially more horror movies that were made, the Vincent Prices of the world and those kind of movies, and Christopher Lee and those kind of movies. And so they would own these packages, and then they'd have 50 titles that they have to do something with. And as I was saying before, they would air them on Sunday afternoon. When the other station had the Packer game, they'd run the horrible titles, until they decided that they would try to actually harness them into something cool. And that's kind of how these shows like mine were born around the country, is that it's like, oh, we got all these movies, why don't we do it so we can sell it? So keep in mind, everything in television is predicated on selling it. That is the nature of the world. Whether it's rotten, horrible shows like mine or the greatest shows you've ever watched, it's all about selling all the time. So back in the day, imagine this now, and I always wondered, so a spot on Chiller Theater, and our show started, so this is 1983, it comes on Channel 11 after Saturday Night Live, which was a kickin' lead-in. So you have all this great audience, and spots were literally $10. Okay, so you could...
Testing, 1, 2, hi everybody, hi.
So you could, I don't know if it's Channel 3 or Channel 27 or whatever, they might get a 4 rating for their news, which means that out of all the televisions in existence, 4% are tuned to their news at any given time, because cable and syndicated shows and all that have taken over. I would regularly get a 7, right? Which means 7% of all the TVs, but that's because there was nothing else to watch.
Right.
So having said this, what I never understood was, let's say that I'm just some creepy fat little dude, let's say, and I wanted to like meet someone, and I had $100. Why do I not just buy 10 spots? I'd say, hey everyone, I'm Steve, and I really need to meet a lady. And why the hell would I not do that? I don't understand, because that's how little it costs. So, but to say that, so everything's predicated on money. So the stations decided that in order to sell the 50 horrible movies that they had, if they packaged it into a show, then they could go to the like local car dealer or whomever and say, hey, why don't you be a sponsor of Chiller Theater, and we'll charge you $100 a week or whatever it is. And so it was all predicated. To answer your question in 10 minutes.
Now, I got a question.
Go ahead, Randall.
Explain something to me.
All right.
During the waning days of the show on broadcast television,
Yes.
when the production was done at the station, why did they get so upset when the ratings were good for your show? Because if your ratings were better than, say, the 10 o'clock news, that upset them.
Well,
They're in
Randy,
the business of making money.
Randy was working at the
Is it
station
ratings
in
good?
question. So literally, we had a period where our show on a Green Bay station had actually gotten a higher rating than their newscast. And they were pissed, right? Pardon my language, but they were mad because, of course, they don't want their news, you know.
So it conflicts with their brand?
Yeah.
Is that it?
Well, and the death
No
of shows.
No Twittering any of this.
Yeah, the death
I still
of
work at a
shows
TV station.
like ours, the death of shows like ours was the infomercial. And in fact, if you want to take a look at something in the history of television that has caused all of us to suffer, it is the birth of the infomercial, because the infomercial was born when the ad execs figured out that they could buy a half hour of time from a TV station at a lesser rate, and the TV station wouldn't have to work on selling 20 spots. They could sell one piece, bang, for less, done, and then they don't even care what they're running. That's what has killed network television or local television to me, and in fact defeated them because it gave you even more reason to go to cable. But the infomercial was the death of small time shows. Local programming was killed by the infomercial because it came to the point where why would we ever salespeople go out and have to sell 100 spots when I could just sell the time to some bogus knife, half-hour knife thing? And so it really became the death knell for local television.
So picture the ditches filled with the corpses of clowns and horrorists.
Clowns are fine. Clowns deserve to be in. Yeah, I just, when I get down to it, I have this sort of, I don't really like clowns, but then I look at myself and think, really, dude? I hate to say it. I swear to God, I really don't like clowns, but there was a day of self-reckoning. And one of my favorite, I had a moment at work, and I have a real job. I work for a production company, and I'm an editor. And I've been a video editor my entire life for over 35 years now. And I was sitting and I had put the makeup on because I had some whacked out appearance later, and I was talking to my boss and we were talking about things unrelated to and I was talking to him and we were talking and I'm like, these people are just insane. And he's like, yeah. And then he stopped for a second and he looked at me and he's like, ha! And he just busted out laughing because he's talking to a face-painted 50-year-old saying that other people were insane. It made no sense.
I would like to add to that I think to his credit and his uniqueness that's also
That don't really work that well.
that is also the same character he has as Ned the Dad on the show. He doesn't have a backstory. He wasn't a zombie that was left over from some apocalypse. He didn't crawl out of a grave somewhere. He is what he is. A guy who paints his face and tries not to get the station to lose its license if the FCC happens to be listening to stuff that he almost says, but backs away from at the last second. I liken him to Krusty the Clown.
There it is again, the thanks.
Do you remember the Simpsons episode where Krusty lost the rights to the Itchy and Scratchy cartoons? And he had to run some cheap Eastern European propaganda-filled stick figure animated thing. And when it was over, they cut back to Krusty, doesn't realize he's on camera, he's having a smoke. What the hell was that? I could pull a better cartoon out of my hey, boys and girls. So that is the charm of Ned the Dead.
And let me
He's
tell
naughty,
you,
he might say something, and you might miss it if you're not watching.
and let me say now, if you haven't painted your face up like this and gone out to a bar after taping, you haven't lived, friends, because I'll tell you what. And for any young people in the room, I don't mean to be, I don't want to sound sassy or whatever, but in its day, in Green Bay, this was the greatest gift a human could ever have, because I'm telling you, I have lived a life, I went to Milwaukee, Washington High School. I just went to UWGB. I never dreamed I would be on TV. I never thought I'd be on the radio. I never thought I would do any of that. And the life that I have had of kindness from people, for 30-some years, my kids grew up. I have a 25-year-old and a 17-year-old. And they think that people come up to everyone in the store and just love on them. They think, but how great is that? I want them to think that. But they have witnessed nothing but kindness in their whole lives. And so it has been this awesome gift, because this was before the era where everyone needs to be torn down for everything, you know, because I feel like now, no matter who you are, I mean, you can be the greatest, you could be Mother Teresa, and people are gonna go online and find a way to rip you, you know, because the world has changed a lot. So I think for young people, you just have to be cool with yourself more than ever. I mean, I think that that's like the secret, is that we have to learn to be cool with ourselves, you know? And it took me to get old to figure that out, you know, so I'm telling young people now, hopefully they'll hear that.
At what point did you realize your audience was becoming multi-generational? That people who saw you as kids had children, and their
who
children
watched.
are having children.
Well, that's, you know.
That your legacy stretches across decades.
What I have enjoyed the most is, and I hear this all the time, and believe me, in Green Bay, everybody knows who I am, so if I don't have the makeup on, everybody still knows. Half the people in town call me Ned when I'm at the store. But I've had literally 1,000 people say, my brother and I, we used to wait till my parents went to sleep and we'd go down in the basement, and we'd sneak down into the basement and we'd watch on the black and white TV downstairs, and that is like the greatest gift ever. Because when I was a kid, I watched Dr. Cadaverino in Milwaukee when my mom was asleep, and you know, and with whomever she had brought home, unfortunately. But sorry about that. She passed away a few years back, and I guess I'll be honest now about what it was like growing up. It was a little different. So my life was a little unusual, but. All the more reason why I wanted to be by myself watching, but because I didn't really like those guys that much. But you know, that has been said to me a million times. So it's really wonderful. It's wonderful.
What was the first impetus of putting on the face paint to be like, was it just, we get these movies, I got nothing to do tonight, let's see what can do it? Or?
Well, the station hired a makeup. They said, first of all, they wanted me to be a woman. So they said, we want this character to be an old woman. So, and yet they wanted me to do it. And now keep in mind, I was
Was that Don Shunke?
That was Dave Commissar. So this was the program director of the TV station. So I am at the time, I'm 23 years old. I'm a news photographer. I am a wild young man who is smoking a little too much pot, you know, and a little too crazy at the time, I'll be honest. And so I was pretty wild working there. And so they said they wanted it to be a woman. So, and I'm like, whatever, okay. So I drove around and I tried to do a little woman voice. It sounded a lot like, who was the shaky one of the, you know, who was the old, you know, went on the actress, the old actress who got all shaky at the end. They were Hepburn, what is Hepburn? So, guys, I was kind of like doing that horrible Hepburn thing, and I'm thinking, this does not play at all. So I went and I begged them and I said, listen, you know, I'll do whatever you want, but damn, dude, can I just be a guy? I mean, and it's not like, and again, it's not like it was I've got to be a man. It's like, I don't think I could pull this off, and it would have been ridiculous in retrospect. So they acquiesced to that, and they said, okay, fine, you can be a guy. And, you know, so I began to practice voices and junk, and I came upon this. It's kind of a voice, finally was in the car, and it's like a cross between like a Russian guy and someone from somewhere, you know, from Sobieski up by Green Bay, and it's kind of a crazy combination. And then they hired this dude to do the makeup, so they knew that and I wish to God, if ever there was an event that did not occur in my life, had they passed on the makeup, it would have made my life so great, because I can't tell you how much it sucks to wear this stuff. For 30-some years, 30 years, I have learned I get an itchy face and I can't touch it. And so, I mean, even in my regular life when I'm not wearing this, I'm like, my face itches, you know, I don't even want to touch it because I'm so afraid. So it's been horrible wearing this crap. It's horrible.
We got a thumbs up from the green freak.
Oh my God, it's so awful.
He airbrushes his.
Yeah,
Awesome.
well, I'll tell you what.
Yeah.
This has been so the guy who does the makeup, they bring this makeup artist guy in, and keep in mind this is a much different era. He touched my face for a really long time, okay? So I was kind of uncomfortable, and not in a weird, like, icky, homophobic way, because I'm not like that, and I've never been, but he really did. He spent a lot of time, like, caressing my face and stuff, and up to that point in my life, I hadn't really had my face caressed. You know, seriously. by anyone. You can tell I didn't, the girls didn't like me that much at the time. Now of course they're all over me, but they didn't like me that much at the time. So he would touch my face, and then eventually he made this really cool looking makeup, which looks nothing like this train wreck that you're looking at now. And in fact, it even had the pieces of junk that got glued to my face. He made icky facial skin funk, and they would glue the skin funk on, and he made it really cool. So then in that day, the artist from the TV station, he taught them how to do it. So every time I was going to tape, which was every 2 weeks we would generally tape, I would have to go and sit, and then the artists were my friends at the station, oh God. Then they'd have to paint me up, and then eventually I just had to do it myself, and then it started to look bad like this. But it's been like this a lot longer than it was the other way. But, so they decided that would be the thing, that we would do the makeup. And so the first show was born. And when the first show went on, and these shows are on YouTube. And if you go to YouTube, there are shows from my first year in 1982 that are on YouTube. If you YouTube Ned the Dead, there's stuff in there from the 80s, and it is just, I weigh, right now I'm 220, I weigh literally 135. I was serious. I'm 100 pounds lighter, and just this little goofy dude with a dorky kind of mullet, and that was bad. It's horrible. It's fun. Really
What was your filming schedule like? Did you go in once a week, or did you film in batches?
Every 2 weeks. Basically the weird thing is that I got paid for this too. So when I was at the TV station for the first run, I did not get paid because I worked at the station, and therefore it was part of my regular duties. So when I went to Milwaukee and came back, I managed to talk a local business into being a sponsor, and I actually started to receive pay for this. Because I felt I had kids and stuff, and that was a part-time job, I thought I should be paid. But, the schedule, I never really realized that I could take a couple weeks off. So to answer your question, we would shoot every 2 weeks at the TV station, and then maybe every once in a while every 3 weeks. So we do 2 to 3 shows at a time. But I went for years where I did a show every single week, for 6, 7 years straight, without a break ever. So I would always have a new show because I wanted to be paid. Because if it wasn't, if it was a repeat, they're not going to pay me to not go into the studio, even though they probably would have, but I was too dumb to figure that out. So when I was thinking about it, I think we did, I think it was, 22 years, I guess, or what was it? It was 7 years the first time, then back in 95, so it was, basically 22 years of actual shows. And, so 52 times 22, it's over 1,000 shows, and then in each show there was 10 to 20 breaks. So you're talking 10,000 to 15,000 breaks, which is beyond me to even comprehend. And then I was also on the radio then. I was on a rock station and doing the morning show there for 5 years too, so I've been on a lot. Shocking.
Did you ever film live?
Yes, I did. I actually did, I think, 2 live shows. I did one at Tom's Drive-In Tom's Drive-In up in Menasha or something like that Mark Ellis set up, and it was really fun. And I did one other, and I don't quite remember where that was, unfortunately. 2 live shows, I think, out of 1,000. So, yes, sir.
This is actually from my friend Chris in Olson, Illinois. He wanted me to ask you if you remember the Sore Red Monkey Ball game. So in the town they said hello.
Back in the day, he's asking if I remember the Sore Red Monkey Butt Gang, which I very much do remember. And there would always be little weird catchphrases that caught on, like Hubertus. And if those of you are familiar, Hubertus is a town near Holy Hill. And I used to get letters from Hubertus, and I then transformed Hubertus into a runny sore on one's butt, and I would call it my Hubertus, and I did it for years. I talked about it. Well, and we got fascinated for a while with the horrible soreness of monkeys' butts and why they're not just cringing all the time, because their butts are very sore, obviously, because they're all red. And so these guys from the UP, I believe it was the UP, initially became the Red Monkey Butt Gang and would send horrible stuff. Also, horrible stuff. Let me say also that back in the day, prisoners were allowed to watch and send stuff, and I have received thousands of pieces of stuff from prisons. And so, but the weird part was, like, when CCAP came around, you all know what CCAP is, you know, where you look people up on, when CCAP came around, I could see what they were in for, and if they were in for something that I considered to be really bad, I wouldn't ever like read their letter or show their stuff on the show, because I was not interested in showing that from a pedophile or someone who really committed a violent crime, you know, but if someone's in there for tax fraud, oh well, you know, I'll use that one. That's not to say I condone tax fraud, but I can read that letter. But so, I have received more whacked out junk from the prison, and I mean dark and freaky stuff, really dark and freaky stuff. Like, and I still have a lot of it in my basement that my family won't, even the animals don't go near. I swear to God. You know, I had, just as an aside, when I was a kid, I did this horrible, I went to Milwaukee, Washington High, which was right in the middle of the, kind of the inner city of Milwaukee, but somehow I talked this biology teacher into letting me do an experiment where he gave me baby chickens and I had to inject them with hormones in my basement. And so I swear to God, so the teacher, was advanced biology at Washington High. So Mr. McKinney was the teacher, and he lived out in Menominee Falls or wherever, where he apparently lived on a farm. So he gives me 10 baby chickens, and I put them in a cage in my basement, and they have little leg bands based on how much hormones I'm giving. And so I'm giving groups of 3 varying amounts of testosterone, and then one of them gets none. And this is all going to tie back together, and maybe you'll explain some of why I'm crazy. But so we would, and this is horrible, and I didn't really realize what I was getting into. So I get this, and literally I have to go down to my basement every night and go grab these chickens, and then in their little leg inject them with a certain degree of these hormones. Well, first of all, they start to grow like crazy. They're getting their hormones, and they start to do rooster junk, which is awfully weird. But this all ties back, because the pets were the same way about that they were with the stuff from the prisoners. The animals would have nothing to do with our basement, which is where the litter box was. And so eventually I've got this pile, fine Jake, this pile of like, these chickens down there. And the experiment eventually ended when they all ganged up and killed the control chicken, because it was receiving no. And so I called Mr. McKinney on the regular phone, because of course there wasn't cell phones that your kids would call. And so I have to call Mr. McKinney. Something's gone horribly wrong. They've killed the one. And then he called, and I assume that he sold them for meat too. No, sure. I swear to God, I'm sure he did. So, and this is just an aside. I apologize. Got a little off kilter there. I apologize. I have some issues.
Did you ever have any overzealous female fans?
Heck yeah. He is
All right,
absolutely.
well, how do you get those? That's what I
Dude, look in the mirror and ask that question again. I like that. I will be kind about this whole thing, but I was married during my entire time as Ned, so therefore, of course, I did not act on any of those kinds of things. Had I been single, though, it probably would have been the greatest gift that a single guy could have had, because it was certainly, let's just say that people are it was just fun. People were friendly, and you can see I'm sort of outgoing, so it's, I enjoyed the social aspects of it a lot, and people, being on TV in those days was a lot cooler than it is now. People now, in those days still TV was, you were still making it up as you went. Now TV, kids are making videos when they're in kindergarten, so therefore it's a totally different world. When I started doing this, if you were on TV, to people that was unbelievable. And now, of course, it's nothing. It's people are making video every minute.
Did you feel like your popularity went up as your production value went down? Like when you started doing your own makeup, like when people are like, this is so goofy, but I love it.
I don't think it was related to that. I think that the popularity went up just because I had been on longer and longer and longer, and so these generational deals were starting. So like, again, where the kids had watched when they were little and suddenly they were older and they were telling their brothers and sisters, it was starting to be multi-generational, and then more people would watch. But when cable came around, that was the death knell for the whole thing because, you know, I wouldn't watch me if I had the chance to watch something good, seriously. I mean, you know what, it's fun and everything, but only a certain type of person watches this by choice all the time, you know? And so, right, Phil, right. I mean, but thank goodness. And, you know, what I will say about an event like this thing here, and I had said this to people before, is that, you know, I was out wearing makeup in 32, 33 years ago. I was wearing this, and I was the only living human within 150 miles that was doing this as a guy, you know? So therefore, I know what it's like to do what all these young people are doing here and wearing all this cool junk and being themselves. You know, it takes courage when, before anybody knew what I was doing and I'm driving around wearing this stuff, people thought, you know, they're like, what's wrong with you? So I get all this. So the fact that we live in a world where this can occur, and when I drove up here today and I'm sitting in the parking lot and I'm thinking, this is probably the time in my life where I will be the least noticeable of any time ever, right? I'm old and stupid and have this dumb makeup on and everybody looks better than me and everybody has cooler junk on. But how awesome is that we live in a world where we all get to be, you know, I just think it's so neat that we get to have a place for all of us because that wasn't that way. And part of the reason that people liked our thing is because it was geeky and they could go in their basement and get all geekified and live out that part of themselves. So I love the fact that it's like wide open and people get to be who they are, and there's things like this where people can get together, because the reality, we were doing an interview before and they were asking about you know, about social media and all the rest of it, and I was saying that the key and the reason that stuff like this is so cool is that people want to be with people. That's just the way it is. I mean, you know, you can do whatever you want on social media, or you can do whatever you want yourself, but the reason that GEEK.KON is so cool is because I want to put on my costume and then I want to go be with other people who are doing the same thing, and I want to talk to them and be with them. The whole nature of life is about being with humans, and yet all of our communication right now is tearing us away from being with humans, and it's all occurring without human contact. So that's why stuff like this will grow and be cool, is because humans always want to be with humans, and it's going to take us another decade to get that balance back, because right now we're way too, you know, we do everything not human. So I think this stuff like this is a chance for us to all remember that we're people and we need to be around people. Right, honey? So I get, you know, you can tell I get, I'm opinionated too, unfortunately. So.
No,
Any other?
I don't really remember a lot of Doc Moreau. Like when I watched it, it was just you.
Uh-huh.
Like, how did you bring in Doc Moreau to the whole? How did you get involved?
I was actually working behind the scenes for quite a while, editing his movies together. Some of them, the packages, they bought a cash package.
Back up for 1 second to Arch Mess. Talk about, he has his own television history as well, but go there first.
That was kind of strange. I auditioned at a small TV station in Appleton that a long time ago went dark, but it was fun while it lasted. It was the first Fox affiliate in the Green Bay market, and we had a lot of first-run syndicated programming, but it was a very small operation. A lot of fun. In fact, we're having a reunion soon with people that worked there during that era.
Go ahead.
And the general manager got an idea about, in fact, Ned the Dead had just started up, and he wanted to have some locally hosted thing, and figured out that we had these wrestling shows. We had like 2 hours of wrestling on Saturday night. Had the idea that somebody should host that. So he opened auditions for who would be a wrestling character that would promote these shows. And the unfortunate thing about it is that the wrestling shows were delivered via satellite practically the same day that we aired them. So there was no advance information on who was in the matches, who was going to win, who was going to lose, what the drama was, how to really sell the thing. There were no promos involved. So I came up with a wrestling character and auditioned with like half a dozen other people. And the idea I thought was, well, I can be Arch Mess, the Untouchable. His full name was Elliot Arch Mess. And he had a backstory. He was a character from the UP, from the great up north, and he was out of a job and came to the station begging for work. And he was such an idiot on the show. All he basically did was to dare you to change the channel and to come back. He couldn't be specific about the matches. It was wrestling. It was just stupid
And it was
stuff.
over the top, but it was great. It really was great stuff. I mean, local TV, man, it is so fun. If you just, you know, the key, and you go on then, but you know what? He just was unafraid. The secret is to just be unafraid in life and just go lay it out there and see, because it was just...
You don't want to kick yourself
crazy.
Afterwards that you had an opportunity and didn't take a shot.
So how did you, all right, so then...
I didn't know what the other guys were going to come up with, what they were going to do. Well, the thing is, it was predicated on some of the great lies of our general manager, who was a great showman. He could have worked for a circus and got people into the tent by barking. He swore we were going to get a hot tub sponsor, and you're going to have a co-host who's a chick with big knockers, and we're going to just have fun, and we're not going to tell anybody.
And this is the way they were talking those days, by the way. There was no, HR did not exist at all. At all.
And our staff parties too were spouseless. You could not turn up with your other half. Yeah, there was. Those were fun. He was a crazy man that drove up every day from Milwaukee to be at a station just outside of Appleton. And so, of course, for all that, my co-host turned out to be a dead cat named Earl. Remember Earl the dead cat was kind of a craze for a while back in the 80s when they started selling anything you could sell on an infomercial on wire.
There it is again, the infomercial, the death of...
the beginnings of ShamWow, you know. And Earl was a doll with X's for eyes and his little tongue hanging out, and he was just dead. He was flat, like he'd been run over. And I would talk to the cat. And, Earl the dead cat. So that was kind of fun. So in a way, we were sort of competing against each other, but the same people weren't watching at all. People remember me.
Yeah, I had the highbrow. I had the highbrow. He had the wrestling.
He did.
Okay, so you know, I had the
and more
the
people
intellectuals.
remember Arch Mess than they remember Doc Moreau. I was at Doc Moreau for 5 years with him, and there is a generation of Dead to Dead fans that know me and freak out when they realize I'm Doc Moreau. Most of the world couldn't care less. Most of the people that watched him way back in the day, you know, have no memory of Doc Moreau. I came along later. But, you know, it was fun. In fact, it's a nice form of celebrity to have. I saw a documentary once about how celebrity can affect your life before reality TV. What the ups and downs of being a celebrity, how it can be fun, what the advantages are, what the downside might be if you don't, you know, take care of yourself, if you don't behave. Excuse me. And then there is a celebrity where people don't know you're a celebrity if they meet you on the street. And I remember this guy being interviewed, this grandfatherly guy with a mustache and a beard and balding. And the beauty of it is people don't know who I am unless I start talking like this. And he's the voice of Bullwinkle. So I feel I have that celebrity. If somebody really, really works at it, are you Doc Moreau? I saw a movie in Fond du Lac once with a bunch of friends, and we were just yakking it up in the theater before the movie started. And there was a kid there that recognized my voice from me talking, and he came up afterwards, and it just freaked him out that I was Dr. Moreau, and I was meeting him, and he had this wonderful story, this touching story about having been hit by a car while he was on his bike, and how they thought he would die.
Did you call it
and he had all this surgery. Well, watching Chiller Theater is what helped him survive this process of coming back.
And you've never told me this?
He would never walk again. Every Saturday night they rolled him in front of the TV. And there would be the power of laughter would bring him back. And so he had surgery and pins and you know, just, but he's come on. You know?
So to answer your question though, basically back to when Randy got involved, he worked at the TV station and I'm doing the shows. Over time, I was at Channel 11 2 different times. I was at Time Warner. I was on Channel 32, which was whatever at the time, and then on Channel 26. So I was on 5 different broadcast entities in 30 some years. And Randy was working at the station and occasionally would feed me these tidbits about the movies because he realized I didn't know anything about the movies. So I would do an entire Ned the Dead show talking about this movie, and yet I had no real information. I had watched it because they would give me the movie with the breaks, so at least I knew when they were coming to me what had just transpired. But I never really thought to, you know, and this was pre-internet for much of it, but I never really thought to actually find out about the movie or anything because I was more into just the fun of the character. I didn't really see it. I wasn't a big fan of horror movies. I've never really been a big fan of horror movies, strangely enough. And so, but he, on the other hand, was the world's biggest aficionado of horror movies. And
I really wasn't. I just started looking him up.
well, he starts to feed me info, so he's not on, but I'm getting these like weird little notes that have like kind of, they're greasy or something. I wasn't sure what was on them. It was upsetting. So I'm still not sure, and I washed a lot in those days. But, so I'm getting these notes and
I
he's
was
kind of
like a prisoner. I was in the dungeon.
and the
looking
pets
at
don't
these
go
movies.
near him either. So that's the other part. They don't go anywhere near Randy. So he's giving me these things, and he's like, dude, you might want to mention that so-and-so, that in fact, this great actor is the child in this thing, or something like that. So he's starting to hand me these tidbits, and eventually I say, dude, why don't you come on the show, and let's just try that, because, you know, so we did it kind of as a little test kitchen thing, and the dish turned out really good, although it was weird for us, because I'd been on myself for my entire career. You know, and so I've probably done 800 shows by myself.
I would have been happy to be like a Harpo character that never talked, that just squeezed his monkey bladder.
Thank God you have the monkey bladder. This and his wife made this, and this thing. His wife made this, which I like it. Kind of to, it's almost like one of those, like an Irish pipes, you know, like the Riverdance, when Riverdance was all popular, and there was that mournful song that the dude in the chair and the light played. You know, and the whole place was quiet, and no one would even dance to it. They would come out, and this thing, I could spend a week with just this.
What's your missed was the evolution
Very
of
little
the monkey
food.
bladder, because at first it was a plastic bag with Notice it's self-inflating.
It does, but it's so cool, and you can keep it, and you can keep working it. It's all good. I'm just doing this for the
They're gonna wonder what
next
we're
room.
doing over
We're having an elephant symposium. Sorry, the act is loose. I apologize. This thing is so. Here's Randy's wife making this horrible thing. I mean, when you're done and you go, aha! Like, can you imagine that? I mean.
There's lips on it.
Well, that's the sick. Yeah, that's the relationship part of it that we don't really get into. It has a dual purpose. It's a little unusual. It is both my friend and my spouse. Sorry.
Oddly enough, I was working on the movies.
Where does the plank come from?
Spank the plank. I'll talk about that in a minute. Go ahead, Randall. I will.
And there was a point in time when the movies were given to the station in a cash form, which meant cash. There were no commercials in it. There were no commercial breaks. And these old movies, the worst of them, were on 16mm film originally. And television prints that had splices in it, Academy leader, and they started the tape rolling, an hour-long or 90-minute tape, and they started playing the movie on a projector. And when it ran out of film, they'd slap up another reel and thread it up, and there you go again. So they had to be worked on, to be cleaned up, to take out all the junk, all the Academy leaders, the splices, fix as much of it as I could. So it was a lot of work, but I spent so much time with them, I got interested in the actors in them. Some of them were, hey, I know that's a TV actor. That guy guest starred on Star Trek. Wow! And then I didn't know much about Bela Lugosi. I didn't know much about women that were only in Roger Corman movies. And I just started looking them up. I really wasn't an expert on the subject until I had to work on the movies themselves. And it was like mining gold. Whenever I found something on the Internet Movie Database, I'd slip him a factoid in case he wanted to mention it on the air. So he did a shout out to Dr. Moreau. Doc Moreau is working on our movies in the dungeon. When he invited me to come on camera with him, Moreau is really my name. I wouldn't normally create a character with my own name.
Right, so but sadly he's in the phone book.
I kept Dr. Moreau going as a scientist. So.
And so it really helped the show. Now, she was mentioning about something called spanking the plank. Now, if you've ever watched our show, first of all, the show was done for $5. So the initial at the beginning, it was 2 ladders with a big board across it, and then I was keyed, which is a term for superimposed. When they shoot green screen in the biz, it's called keying. Is what you do when you have a green screen shot. You key it over something, and therefore, or behind something. So we had a ticket booth piece of art that the camera shot, which was a ticket booth, and then they would chroma key me inside the ticket booth. So, and the shelf was in fact just a board between ladders. So if you walked into the studio, I'm doing my whole show, and it's basically just 2 ladders and a board, and that's it. You don't see any ticket booth or any of that. Well, unbeknownst to me, I began to hit this damn board, and I started to do it with great regularity, to the point where it became like some people hated it, but some people would have like drinking games. Every time I hit the thing, they would have to drink. And I'm telling you, that was very popular. But so this whole spanking the plank became, and I couldn't stop. That was the whole thing. It's not like I did it on purpose. I couldn't stop. For whatever reason, I would say it was like that. It was like the boom boom of the drum. So I'd be like, man, what do you think about that? Bang, and bang, and I keep pounding this thing.
He could have said slap the board.
Right,
But
well,
come on.
So it did become a very popular. It became a very popular part of the show. It did. Man. Yes.
Where did you get $5 for your budget?
Yeah, come on, the board must have cost $5.
That really is so true, though. I mean, hence this kind of stuff, right? You just have to have someone around. This thing, we should pass this around and let them. It is so. This thing has been abused and has stood the test of time. It's
Coming up now in the shows that Kenobi-wan is remastering is the evolution of the monkey bladder from just a plastic bag that had to be
manually
blown up
reblown.
again.
Yeah, pre-blown monkey bladder.
When this
ladies and
version
gentlemen.
came along, he started doing ShamWow level infomercials within the show. I just give him a headset
Well,
and off he would
and
go.
here's the secret about Randy and I is that Randy is does the voiceovers for the television station he works at. So all the local spots, basically from that station, are voiced over by Randy, who has probably voiced 1,000 television commercials, I'm sure, over time.
Not
at
so
least.
much anymore.
I, on the other hand, am also the voice of a company called Van Vreedes, which does, and I have personally made 1,400 shows with both my voice and have edited those. So we're both on wildly, even not as our characters, so we're pretty used to being on in a variety of platforms. So it's been quite a lot of fun.
Did you ever have like a lot of local, other than people sponsoring you, did you get a lot of offers from like doing, not just Van Breeden, but like doing sponsored as Ned for like when you went to Tom's? I mean, did you get a lot of offers like that?
Yeah, you know what? I mean, yes and no. I mean, the reality is, and the question is, did we get a lot of offers? I did a lot of appearances, I mean, more so than doing commercials, I would do a lot of appearances, particularly back in the day where, they would hire me to come to their concert or their thing, which was very fun, So I remember when the first time I was going to do an appearance, and keep in mind, I'm just like a kid who grew up on 50th North, right? I just had no concept, and this is back in the early 80s, and so they call and they say, we'd like to have you come to our thing, would $75 an hour be okay? I'm 23 years old, and it's 1983, and that's what lawyers make. So it was so ridiculous, and I felt so guilty, and I went there with my tail between my legs like, can I wash your car? Because I felt so bad that anyone would ever want to pay me. So I always made sure I did twice as many charity things as I did things for pay, because I just felt so guilty that anyone could make money to go do this, because it's just so fun, And I have done, The other part is that I've done just a wild amount of charity, like the Heart Association thing and the, you know, all of those kinds of things. I've just done a million of those, so it does put us in a neat position to do that stuff.
Before we run out of time, real important, what is Ned doing now? Where are you going?
I'm going back to Green Bay at 5 o'clock. At 6 o'clock. You guys are staying, however, so the party will be in their room, or rooms, I assume, right? Rooms? Sorry. You know, I would actually like to stay here because I bet it gets wacky at this thing at night. You know what I'm saying? I am thinking, I'll tell you what, as I was sad that I didn't choose to stay because I'm looking at all those people thinking, anybody over 21 who's wearing all that junk, it's got to get fun here at night. Even under 21, but you know, it's probably quite a lot of fun. So where we're headed is, I mean, Ken has basically, he has remastered our shows and they have put them all back together, and Ken has basically kept us going. I mean, he has, you know, through his diligence and just being kind as someone who was a fan and who basically has taken over, our shows have been remastered and they're becoming available for streaming. And so we've got like 25 of them that are streamable now, the full shows with the movies. And, you know, it's a hard one to say because these guys have worked very hard and I've been a dink of a partner to them over time. So, you know, I sort of burned out for a while and they've kept this thing rolling. So to answer your question, I think we're going to try to get as much as we can that is streamable or online and try and interest a new generation. Because the reality of this stuff is that it's actually, I hate to say it, I mean, when I was watching the one today, especially the ones we make now, they can be pretty funny actually. I have to say they actually are. And I think a new generation could get interested in them. And if that were to occur, I suspect that we would consider trying to make new shows. You know, so we'll see. Well, we have to do things that are public domain now.
Yeah, all the movies are public
So-
domain, so there's no fee.
They're about to add a lot of new movies to it. Any day now?
I'm not sure.
It's gonna be.
Yeah, so we're basically with, you know, because it still doesn't pay. So we have to, so we have to do
But
things
they
that
don't
are.
like you to cut in and make fun of their stuff.
Right.
Right, yeah, so it has to be public domain where it's cuttable, where everybody can cut on it, so, you know, that's basically what I think's going on, so. I think we need to bail here, I think we have to give up our room, thank you guys so much.